Bun, care e planul pe azi?
Ce, nu v-ați spălat când ați ajuns? Dușul.
Unde mergem azi? Care e planul? Facem
Ai considerat-o lentă? Și eu ieri. Vai, și eu acasă îi mai
fost
dau și
ieri.
ei vânt, știi? Ca să se ducă mai repede.
Am fost
jos.
aseară aici. Dar nu ne grăbim.
Unde se duce?
Să vadă ce e acolo.
Da, păi na. A fost bine.
Deci care e planul ăsta? Unde mergem azi? Pe jos sau cu barcă de asta?
Scors că pe jos.
Pe jos?
Astea sunt chestii istorice.
Ah, și asta ne plimbă toată ziua?
Da.
Super.
Toată ziua, vreo 3 ore nu mai.
După aia mă gândeam că luăm o barcă și ne plimbăm cu ea. Ce părere aveți? Good. O barcă, adică fiind o gondolă. Yes.
Hai să vedem.
Today is the day. Eu nu știu unde merg. Oh my god.
Deci că n-ai trecut ieri pe aici de vreo 4 ore.
Mai schinte, nu mi-am uitat. Ok. Nu mi-am uitat.
Ce damp a venit. Iară mă plâng că pute.
Cristi, ai văzut grădina?
Bine, trebuia să facem dreapta acolo, da?
Ai văzut?
Miresea cu noi.
Era seara cu noi și așteptăm ghidul. Uite, ăsta e ghidul. Nu e ăsta.
Nu, mă, e unul tinerel simpatic.
De unde știi?
Că așa eu arată poza de pe WhatsApp, că e scris Mălini.
Ah.
Steps. Sorry? Or maybe steps. Well, we're not going up, don't fret. I wouldn't challenge you that much, don't you worry. So, can we get everyone in so you can all see? So this is the Scala Contarini dal Bovolo. So Bovolo in Venetian dialect means snail. So this is the snail tower basically because of the spiral staircase that looks a little bit like a snail shell. So this is a 17th century structure. And originally this was one of the properties of the Contarini family, who are one of the most famous aristocratic families in the city. And the Contarinis, basically, they had this property in the middle of San Marco, and they had another much bigger and much more beautiful one over in Canaleggio. And so this one was given to, like, the younger brother, basically. And so one of these younger brothers decided that he was tired of living in his brother's shadow, and he wanted to build something a bit nicer on his house to show off. And so he built this massive staircase on the side. So the architecture of it is really, really interesting as well. You can see that on the front side, the side facing us, you've just got windows and columns. So there's not actually very much weight on this side compared to at the back, which is all brick, right? But if you look in the center, you can see this column in the center. All of the steps in the tower itself are all actually part of the same piece of stone as that central column. So the entire center of the building basically is made out of one carved piece of rock, which has been made into a giant spiral. So that's kind of the reason that it's able to stay upright.
How do you get it here?
The stones, like, honestly, Venetian engineering is a marvel. There's so much about, I mean, there is a church over in Dorso d'Oro. They have rotated the entire front of the church, and like trying to just envision how that is possible, especially in a city where you haven't got, like, you know, motorized vehicles. Everything is done by boat. Absolutely insane, yeah. So yeah, actually bringing all of the materials here is a feat in itself. But yeah. So yeah. The other really interesting thing about the architecture you can see as well is if you look between the layers of columns, you've got these kind of bars which work to basically hold the whole building together to stop it from bulging outwards and collapsing. But if you look around at the other buildings in the area, you can see they've all got the same things. So this isn't something which is used just for these massive tall buildings with arches on the edges. Because in Venice, everything has to be made of wood, essentially.
These squares?
Yeah, the squares on here as well.
Yeah, just like the UK. It has all those going through the brick so that they don't spread apart.
Yeah, but in Venice particularly important because of the fact that the foundations here are very, very weak. everything inside the buildings has to be made of wood. And so these mark basically where the floors are. And so this means that the wooden interior of the building is stuck to the brick exterior of the building. And what's really interesting as well is, like you were saying about swaying, especially on the houses that touch the water, they have to be able to move. So when the tide changes, the buildings themselves slightly sway. So they say, so they say people in Venice never suffer from sea legs because like their whole lives, their whole buildings are just moving around as well. So they're used to it when they get on the boat. So at the end of the 18th century, Napoleon conquered the city of Venice, and when he came in, the entire aristocracy of Venice basically collapsed, and all of these rich families had to sell off all of their properties, and this one was sold off to the state of Austria, who turned it into an observatory. So they removed the top floor, so you can see the roof is a little bit different, and put a load of telescopes up there so that they could see the stars at night, which is rather lovely. You can still climb up it. There's also a museum in this palace on the right, which is a very good idea to visit while you're climbing, because if you try and do it all in one go, your legs are going to be very angry with you and your head is going to be very angry as well. So you'll get to the top absolutely exhausted with really bad vertigo. So definitely, if you do go up, then go to the museum as well. From the top, you can see as far as the Dolomites on a clear day. And you can also see out over the whole lagoon and see the top of San Marco as well. So really, really beautiful.
Some of the art that's being displayed.
Yes. So it's a contemporary art museum as well. Love it. So a little quick thing about this square as well, which is quite interesting. So one thing you'll notice, especially if you've travelled a lot around the rest of Italy, is that in Venice there's very few statues. I think there's only 8 in the entire city. And if you go to like Pavia, for example, like a tiny little city next to Milan, they have hundreds of statues. We have 8. So the ones that we do have are all from after Venice lost its independence. So Venice was independent for like 1,400 years. Almost all of the statues that we have are from the last 100 years when Venice was part of Italy. And this one over here is Manin, Daniele Manin, who's a very interesting figure, and the fact that he has a statue here is also very interesting. So you notice that this is quite an ugly square, really, compared to the rest of Venice. We've got this horrible bank over here, and it's just a bit, we're not in the nicest part of Venice. So Daniele Manin was the leader of the independence movement when Venice was taken over by Austria. And he led a revolution against Austria, which was ultimately unsuccessful, but he was a national hero for the people of Venice. So when the Italians took over control of the city, the people of Venice demanded a statue to Manin, who was their independence leader. And the Italians were like, oh, of course, yes, fought against the Austrians, great. One slight problem, of course, is that Manin did not want to be part of Italy. He wanted Venice to be independent. And so he does not get a statue right in the centre of town or in any of the kind of really big important places. He gets one over here, out on the outskirts, in a quite ugly square, essentially. And you can also see, when you go around a bit, you'll see he got a very ugly lion. So the lion with wings is the symbol of Venice. And this one looks like he has his eyes plucked out. He's not the prettiest of the lions in town. But yes, we always say that the Italians were very begrudging to build this statue. And so they didn't necessarily put it in the best place, and they didn't necessarily do the best job. Start. So just a little bit about sort of the road names, really. So one thing you notice a lot when you walk around Venice is that, like, in Venice, all of the streets, well, not all of the streets, but a lot of the streets are called calle, which is the same as in Spanish, but not the same as in Italian. So in Italian, it would be via. Yeah.
Because it's calle.
So in Venetian dialect, they do it the same as Spanish. So when you see a double L, it's like a ye, the same as Spanish. But yes, there's a lot of influence from Spanish in the Venetian dialect, so you'll often find calle. And the other thing as well is, if you look at the name of this street, this is the Rio Terra dei Assassini. So first thing, Rio Terra is, river, land. And so basically, when Napoleon conquered the city of Venice, he occupied it with his army, and at the time it was impossible to walk from one side of Venice to the other. There was only one bridge over the Grand Canal, which was the Rialto, and there were hundreds of other islands that weren't actually connected to anything else. And if you've got 10,000 men trying to stop people rebelling every 5 minutes, having to get on boats every time that there's a revolution going on, it's exhausting. And so Napoleon actually paved over a lot of the canals in the city, and the ones that are paved over by Napoleon have been renamed Rio Terra. So if you see this, it means that this used to be a canal. So You can see as well here, they've got the sign Fondamenta dei Assassini. Fondamenta is a word for a waterway. So this was a waterway, yeah. The other thing as well, Assassini, murderers. So this part of town was the most unsafe in Venice, basically. Sorry?
What's it like now?
Oh, delightful. Yeah. No, you're not going to get murdered in Venice. Like, Venice is ridiculously safe. There's a couple of places in Venice that, like, walking through it, if you were in any other city in the world, you'd be like, I really shouldn't be here. Like, there's no lights. Like, it's terrifying. You know, you're walking through these like little subway and underpasses. Yeah. If I was like back in the UK, I would feel incredibly unsafe. And then here, you're like, oh, it's lovely, it's fine, it's nice.
It's a bar.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Assassini, basically incredibly unsafe. The reason being, Venice had the biggest difference between the rich and the poor anywhere in the world throughout the kind of Middle Ages. And so if you were poor, very, very motivated to kill rich people. Because if you could kill a rich guy and nick his coat, that would cover your rent for the next 10 years. And so, why wouldn't you? So this is actually one of the reasons that we end up with gondolas being so important in Venice, is because of the fact that it's incredibly unsafe for rich people to walk around the city. They don't. They go everywhere by boat. Having a little bit of water between you and everyone else is great for security, as is having a big muscly man with a big stick. So the gondolas become incredibly important as a status symbol, but also as personal security, essentially. And so rich people never use their legs in Venice. They go everywhere by gondola. The other interesting thing as well is that this is actually the first street in Venice that had streetlights. Because it was so famously dangerous, this was the first place they decided to put lighting when they introduced lights into Venice, basically. If we head on over here, another little interesting tidbit as well. So this is the Calle della Verona. Verona being, the city quite near here as well. So basically, in Venice, if you were not from the city of Venice, you were actually very restricted in where you were allowed to go, and particularly where you were allowed to stay. If you were from Verona and you came to Venice, this was your street. This was the place that you were allowed to stay. So there were no hotels where people from Spain and Germany and Turkey would be sat together. If you came to Venice, you came to your street, and that's where you stayed. So this is like the Veronese quarter almost. And Verona at the time as well was part of the Republic of Venice. Yes. So this is La Fenice. This is the most famous theatre in Venice. Nowadays we've only got 2 full-time operational theatres, one for comedy and one for opera, and this is the opera one. Not originally, but at the kind of golden age of opera, there were over 100 theatres in Venice. Basically anyone with a bit of money turned a part of their house or their palace or whatever into a theatre. It got so bad that we would have visiting musicians from all over Europe, because they knew all they had to do was stand on a street corner with a violin, and by the end of the day someone would hire them and live in their house as a musician. So, a good time to work in the arts, basically. So Venetia was one of the most important theatres in the world for opera. During the golden age of opera, the whole movement was kind of based around the 3 cities of Vienna, Venice and Milan, and Venice was obviously in the middle of that triangle, so Venice became incredibly important as a city of opera, and this was the most important theatre. So it was originally called La Fenice, the Phoenix, because it was a property of the Grimani family, who lost a load of money and decided to sell their main palace and convert it into a theatre to get some of their money back, basically. So it was supposed to represent the rebirth of the family, hence the name the Phoenix. But the Phoenix is also like a symbol of surviving a fire, so it became quite ironic because when they had the competition to design the building itself, the main thing that the architects had to focus on was making it completely fireproof. So because of the fact that this is, the 18th century, you've got these massive, great big heavy lights, you've got pyrotechnics, everyone is smoking, and everything's made of wood. So fire was kind of something you really had to protect against. And so the architect who designed it did a fantastic job, and it survived all of 40 years, and then it burned down. They had to rebuild it again in the 1830s, and then it burned down again in the 1990s. So this version that we see now was actually built in 2003. But the really amazing thing is that a local student who did his PhD at the Architecture University here in Venice, 2 years before the fire that destroyed La Fenice in the 90s, did his PhD thesis on the acoustics of the theatre. And so they were able to piece together exactly what it should look like from all the photos they had, but also what it should sound like from his thesis on the sound site of the theatre. And so if you go and see a performance now, the sound is exactly as it would have been 200 years ago, basically. Yeah. This is San Moise. This is where you find all the very luxurious shops. And also you have this very, very beautiful church, which we're going to go and see in a minute. A little fun saying for you in Venice is say that if you get good customer service in Venice, you're being scammed. So generally, the better something is, the worse the customer service. So for example, like my girlfriend, I think went to the Chanel shop along here and like opened the door and immediately security guard, can I help you? And she goes, oh, I just wanted to have a look. And he goes, look online, and shuts the door in her face. So like, yeah, that'll happen. If you go somewhere and they're really, really lovely and really, really polite, be suspicious, because whatever they're selling you is probably not very good and they just want to get rid of it. But yeah, it's a bit unfortunate. There's this card you can get in Venice, which is the Venetia Unica card. So if you're a resident here, then you get this card which gives you free access to all the museums, and it gives you like public transport for €1 every time instead of €9. So really, really good thing to have. The woman in the office has made me cry 3 times now, because she is absolutely evil. So yeah, the better the thing they're selling you, the more horrible they are about it, basically. So you have to persevere a bit to get good stuff.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So, very quick point. This is pretty much the most famous place to get the gondola. I do not recommend getting a gondola from here. If you want to get a gondola, my recommendation would be to do it nearer Rialto or Accademia, the 2 bridges over the Grand Canal. The reason being, if you take it from here, yes, you get to go under the Bridge of Sighs. You don't really get to see anything else. Because of the fact, like I said, there's not many canals in San Marco, and also most of the canals in San Marco, you can see everything from the street anyway. And also, you're just going to spend all your time in traffic. I mean, if you look, like, actually, to be fair, today's not so bad. Normally there's like 6 gondolas in this little narrow stretch of canal here. So this is by far the most popular section to do it, and if there's a gondola in front of you, then you have to wait for them, you know. So my recommendation is not to take a gondola in the busiest section of the city. Do it somewhere a little bit more quiet, and especially do it somewhere closer to the Grand Canal, so you get to see a bit of the Canal Grande and then some of the little side alleys and stuff as well. So that's my recommendation for gondolas. But yeah. Anyway, this church. Yes. Also, as well, another little fun Venetian thing. There's a saying in Italy, which is the Passo Veneziano, the Venetian step. So Venetians are famous for walking twice as fast as everyone else.
7 minutes.
Yeah. So if I like run off, just tell me to come back. Because I will walk faster than you, because I've seen it all before. So if I am moving too fast or talking too fast or whatever, just tell me to shut up and slow down. It's absolutely fine. On the Passo Veneziano thing as well, when there's football on, you will sometimes see the football fans walking around the city literally with their hands out in front of them like they're praying. The reason being, so much easier to push people out the way when you're doing this. And so they will launch themselves over bridges like a torpedo and literally just smash everyone out the way. So it's quite a sight to behold when the football's on. It's really funny. But yeah, anyway, so this is San Moise. This is a 10th century church originally, but went under quite a lot of renovation work in the 16th and 18th centuries. The facade that you see now is 18th century. Really, really beautiful Baroque facade, and very unusual in Venice in that a lot of it isn't religious work, but figures of different people from the city and people who've contributed towards kind of the maintenance of the city. The other thing that's very interesting about it, of course, is its name. So this is the Church of Moses, and obviously Moses is, you know, Old Testament figure, not really associated with Christianity as much as it is with Judaism. The reason that it was called Moses originally is the most unimaginative reason possible, because the guy who built it was called Moses, and he wanted to name it after himself. But it does lead on to quite an interesting bit of history, because in the 15th century, all of the Jews from Spain and Portugal are expelled from those countries, and a lot of them come to Venice. At the time, Venice is a massive city for merchants and for banking, so a lot of the Jews saw it as a huge opportunity to come here to Venice. So when they got here, massive amounts of persecution against them almost immediately. So within a few years of the initial wave of immigrants, the ghetto in Cannaregio had been set up, and all of the Jews were forced to move to this tiny little plot of land. And also they were not allowed to work in most professions. They were literally only allowed to work as bankers, doctors, antiquarians, and weirdly, magicians. So if you were a Jew and you did not want to be a magician, you had to convert. And so a lot of them who wanted to study law or architecture and other things renounced their faith, perhaps not entirely, but they renounced their faith and pretended at least to be Catholic. And so if they were Catholic, these ex-Jews, and then obviously they couldn't worship in the synagogue anymore because people would realise that they weren't actually Catholic. And so they had to find another place to worship. Unfortunately, in Venice, of course, there's a church named after Moses, who's really important for the Jews. And so in the 16th century, this becomes basically the most popular church for people from the ex-Jewish community. Over years, that kind of relationship disappears. The ex-Jewish community becomes just normal Catholics and sort of intersperses with the rest of the population. But that sort of period in which the church was associated with the ex-Jewish community gives it quite a lot of art and some features that are really interesting and unique, which we can see inside, if you'd like to follow.
Are there any mosques?
So Piazza San Marco, obviously the kind of centre of the city in terms of the monument. We've got over on the left the astronomical clock. We've got the Basilica straight ahead, the Campanile, the bell tower in the middle, the Doge's palace behind it, and then around the edges we've got all these beautiful buildings over here as well. So a little bit of history for you. I mentioned that Venice was founded in the 5th century, and originally it was because of barbarian invasions in the northeast of Italy. So Attila the Hun came through Padua, killed as many people as he could, but most of the aristocracy of Padua had escaped already on their boats to come to the lagoon, and when they did so, they founded the city of Venice, basically. So at the time, Venice was not a permanently settled place. The first building that we have on what is now the main island of Venice is just opposite the Rialto. It's an old church there, which was built in 421. But 421 is the start date of the construction. It is a tiny little church, and they needed 300 years to build it, just because nobody actually lived in Venice permanently for nearly 300 years. The only people who really lived permanently in Venice originally were people who wanted to be outside the law. So when the barbarians all left, the rich people all went back to Padua and Aquileia and everywhere else. The people who stayed were smugglers, pirates, people who wanted, to exist outside of the cities where their activities wouldn't be tracked, basically. So in the 8th century, Venice gets a massive opportunity because you have the Arab invasion. So the Arabs, who recently discovered Islam, conquer the entirety of North Africa and even up to Spain. And so the Pope sets out a decree that it is illegal to do any trade with the North Africans, which everyone in Europe, of course, obeys except for Venice. And so Venice manages to get quite rich through trade in secret with the Arabs, but also it manages to make lots of connections with the Christian communities in North Africa. And this is particularly important in Alexandria, because Alexandria is where St. Mark had died and where his body had been laid. And so the Christians in Alexandria wanted to give the bones of St. Mark to Venice to keep them safe, because they worried that the Muslims would destroy them if they found them. And so Venice came into possession of the bones of St. Mark. Brought them back to Venice to show off, and so it became a really popular site of pilgrimage. So ironically, now Venice is obviously a massively touristy city, but even at its kind of founding, Venice was also, mostly famous for tourism, because people were coming in to see the body of St. Mark. So, slight problem with this is that Venice at the time was a part of the Patriarchate of Aquileia, and obviously the people from Aquileia thought that these bones should go to the capital, and so Aquileia tried to invade Venice to get the bones, and Venice had a big enough fleet to completely wipe out the Aquileian fleet and go and sack the city of Aquileia and declare independence. And so Aquileia was famous for having a beautiful 40-meter tall bell tower, and so Venice decided that they would build one in the lagoon over twice the size, So this is the Campanile di San Marco, which was basically built as a giant middle finger to Aquileia to show Venetian superiority. So this is 99 meters tall. This one took 600 years to build originally. And this version that we see now is actually the second version. At the start of the 20th century, it collapsed and they had to rebuild it. So this is an exact replica as it was originally, but this is only 100 years old. But the original one stood for 1,000 years, so not bad going. So they've got the bones, they built this massive great big tower to show off how amazing they are, and they defeated Aquileia, but Venice is still really, really vulnerable. You've got loads of other really big, important cities in the northeast of Italy and beyond who are looking at Venice as kind of an easy target. And the other problem is that Venice has no one, talented enough to build a basilica. It's an island of pirates and smugglers. There's not many fantastic architects here, and also there's not really anything to build out of. And so Venice asks the Byzantine Empire for assistance. And so the Byzantines offer protection, and in return Venice has to keep making boats to give to the Byzantines, which works quite well as a little deal. But the big advantage is that the Byzantine Empire sends loads of their best architects to Venice to work on the basilica. So if you look, you can see that there's obviously a lot of Greek influence in the building. It looks completely unlike any other cathedral or church that you see around Italy. The reason being, it wasn't built by Italians, it was built by Greeks. And when you look at Venetian architecture in general, you can see that there is a lot of influence from Greece and the Middle East, much less from the rest of Italy. Historically, Venice wasn't really that bothered about places like Florence or Milan. Its main trading partners, its main economic interests were in the east. And so Venice has always had a very different history to the rest of Italy, basically. So if we head on over here, there's another really cool thing to show you. So let's go back under the arches. This is the oldest cafe in Europe, which is not in Paris, and was first inaugurated in 1720, so over 300 years old. When it was first built, it was famous for having loads and loads of mirrors on pretty much every surface. It was covered in mirrors. At the time, mirrors, of course, a massive symbol of luxury, and Venice was one of the first places in the world to make glass mirrors rather than metal ones. Because obviously we had all the glass works in Murano, and they were very, very good. So we had loads of beautiful mirrors. Now, obviously, not so much a symbol of luxury, and so a lot of the mirrors have been replaced with art and other beautiful things. But the mirrors that you see in here are all originals from when the building was first inaugurated, so they're all 300 years old. So yeah, really, really beautiful. The other really amazing thing about the Florian is how unbelievably expensive it is. 15 euros for a can of Coke, and 22 euros if you want to drink it sitting down. So I maybe don't recommend it wholeheartedly, but it is very beautiful. So if you do go, think of it as an experience and don't concentrate on the quality necessarily. But yeah, it's very beautiful.
They have the red coffee.
Red coffee?
Yeah, I've read
I'm not 100%. They have got some specialty coffees. I don't know about a red one in particular, but I have to confess I've never been inside because it's a little bit out of my budget. I'm a guy.
When did you
So another quite funny thing as well is, so I had a friend of mine visit from the UK, and I told him, like, when you come, I'll meet you in town, do not go to anywhere on San Marco, you can't afford it. And he obviously walked past the Florian and thought, well, I obviously can't afford to drink in there. I'll go to this one, which is like really boring and completely average looking, and I'm sure it'll be completely reasonable. Paid 11 euros for a cappuccino. Statues of people in Venice. And the Doge's Palace, you can see two exceptions. First of all, there's one up here above the balcony of the Doge, and there's also one we can't really see right now, but he's over here over the front door. again, the Doge, again on his knees in front of the Lion of St. Mark. So, first important point to note is that he's not stood up in a position of power, he's on his knees in a position of service. And the second thing, that's not a Doge, and that is a very handsome peasant, basically, who they use as a model. So because of the fact that Doge is not allowed to have his own face in the city, they figured, well, sorry? Most important churches of Venice. First of all, over here we have the Basilica Santa Maria della Salute. So this is probably the second most well-known basilica in Venice after St. Mark's. And its name in English means Mary of Health. So in the 17th century, Venice suffered a huge plague, killed more than 50,000 people, more than the entire population of the city today. And the Doge publicly prayed on his balcony and promised that he would build a new basilica in honor of the Virgin Mary if she helped to save the city from the plague. And so the city survived, and afterwards they commissioned the building. So this dates back to the mid 17th century, was finished in the early 18th. And the architect who was given charge of this project at the time was 23 years old. So he literally finished university, and pretty much his first building project was to build not just this massive, great big basilica, but also the island the basilica is on. So there was actually no land underneath here. This spot was chosen because it faced across San Marco, and there was already a church over here, so they didn't want to put it in the same place. And so he had to build the entire island that you see here. As part of that, in order to kind of strengthen the foundations in Venice, the technique that they use is that basically under the water you have a load of mud and rubbish land that you can't build anything on because it's basically quicksand. But about 10 to 20 meters underneath that you have clay. And clay is actually quite stable, and so rather than build on the silt, you have to build on the clay. But in order to reach the clay, you have to drill down and put basically 20 meters worth of trees into the ground. And so underneath the Basilica Santa Maria della Salute, you have over 1 million trees that have been used to stabilize the foundations underneath it, and then laid another set of wood across, and then stone on top of that, and then the basilica. And so the foundations are like an insane building project all by themselves, and then you've got this huge basilica on top of that as well. The other thing that's really unusual about this basilica is that it's completely round. So almost all of the other basilica in the city, well, all the other basilica in the city are a cross shape, the kind of more traditional shape for a basilica. This one is round, and really, really worth seeing. Very, very unique architecture, beautiful floor, and also some very interesting relics and art. So around the same time as they were building this, Venice was at war with the Ottoman Empire, and after they won the war against the Ottomans, one of the things that they took from the Ottomans in the peace treaty was an icon of the Virgin Mary from the island of Crete in Greece, where she's black. It's an incredibly unusual thing to find in ancient Greece. And so they brought it and put it in this basilica because they believed that the reason that the Virgin Mary was black in this icon was because she had absorbed the plague, and it had turned her skin black in the icon, basically. So very interesting thing to go and see.
Was it a tan?
It could just be, she might have just had a very nice holiday in Greece. Lovely. If you want to stay here and like stop for a photo and stuff, and then I'll tell you a bit more about it once we're off the bridge, because like it's pretty busy. Yeah, exactly. So once we're photo, then go for it. Oh, okay, fair enough. And if anyone wants me to take a photo there, so if you run out of water, then you can go fill it up as well. So this is the Church of San Zaccaria, and this actually became one of the richest churches in Venice. So it had two main sources of its wealth. First of all, you can see that it's actually two churches. We've got the old convent over this side, made of brick, and we've got the new marble section from the 16th century over here on the left. And it's one of the tallest churches in the city as well. The reason it became so rich was because the sisters of the convent here owned the land where they built the Basilica di San Marco. So basically everything between here and Piazza San Marco was owned by this convent. And so when they built Basilica di San Marco, they essentially had to start paying rent to this convent. And this became a religious ceremony that they did every year. Was the Doge and the main Cardinal of Venice would come to this church to pay the rent, basically. But the main source of the church as well comes from the 9th century, when there was a civil war in Rome. So because of the civil war, the Pope had to flee the city, and he fled all the way to this convent and came to live here in secret. So the only people who knew the whereabouts of the Pope were the Doge of Venice and the sisters of this convent. And he stayed here for 3 years, and once his rival had been killed, he returned to Rome and donated a huge sum of money to this church, which they used later on to build the second section over here. So he didn't just donate money, he also donated the bones of some very important saints. So Saint Zachary himself, who the church is named after, is buried here. Saint Zachary was the father of John the Baptist. So everything here he is. Religious. And this particular work shows basically the whole overview of the story that I was telling you. So you can see the Pope here in the centre in his long gown, pleading to the Doge to be allowed to enter the city and to escape from the army of Athos. Athos himself, the rival bishop, is over here in the bottom right-hand corner with his army behind him, invading the city. In the bottom left, you've got the Virgin Mary offering protection to the sisters of the convent. And in the top left, you can see the angels giving the church of San Zaccaria to the city of Venice. So the actual architecture of the church itself is depicted here. One of the other really interesting features of this work is that it features the Saint San Zaccaria there at the top as well, falling from the sky. All of the actual dresses and robes for you to use when you're having a carnival party, basically. So the carnival like balls and dances and things like that looks very, very expensive nowadays. The cheapest party I found this year was €300. Yeah, if we head on over this way. Or yes, that's also a very good option. Yes. So this is part of the university. If you come and study either modern or ancient Greek, this is where you do it. And this is Ponte dei Greci, which is the main central bridge in the Greek Quarter. From here, you can see very, very wobbly tower. So this is the Church of St. George of the Greeks, and this is the biggest Orthodox church, the biggest Greek Orthodox church in Italy. So this is the headquarters of the Greek Orthodox organisation of Malta. So anyone who follows the Greek Orthodox faith in this country comes over here to celebrate this special occasion. It's a really beautiful church, which you're not allowed to visit every day, unfortunately. But it also has the Museo delle Icone, so the Museum of Greek Art here as well. And yeah, as I say, because of the fact that it's a very weak foundation in Venice, this is one of the big things in Canada. Very so this one is one of the most inclined in the centre. There's also one in Murano, more inclined. This is the biggest angle block in the city centre.
But is it stabilized next?
It is stable, yes. It's been like this for about 500 years, this church, so it's not going anywhere anytime soon. I'm not sure I would necessarily want to live directly below it, but you know, we'll probably stay.
You won't want to stay in a hotel.
Yeah. If we go.
The hair. Yeah, the dark hair.
Castello is a really interesting part of town. There's a really wide variety of like sort of urban space design. So you've got very, very long, wide canals like this one with like the fundamenta next to it to walk down. And then if you go a little bit further up, you've got these tiny little alleyways to wiggle your way around. So it's a very sort of diverse area. This church up ahead is one of the biggest in the city. This is San Lorenzo, and this is a 9th century church which has never been finished. So they started building it in the 9th century, and then they ran out of money, and they just thought, well, we've done a good enough job, we'll leave it as it is. So if you see the front of the church in just a second, you'll see that it's got lots of little holes in it, which is where they were going to attach a big, like, beautiful decorative front, and then they just ran out of money and decided against it, basically. So it was never actually finished. There's also the Montenegro Pavilion across here, if you are interested in seeing Biennale stuff. The church itself, not actually very interesting, because of the fact that it's so big and it's in quite a like out of the way area. Very difficult to fill it, and so yeah, there's not actually that much that is particularly interesting inside. It's not one of the more unique churches, but it is very, very big. For you over here. So this is the Greek quarter, as I mentioned, and the Greeks did face quite a lot of discrimination in Venice. So for example, whereas in like Spain, for example, the word Moro, or what we would say Moor in English, was used to refer to people from Morocco and Algeria and kind of the western, Africa. Here it was used for Greeks. Greeks were a little bit darker than Venetians, and therefore they were Moorish. And so if you go to Cannaregio, near that church I mentioned, where there's all the Tintoretto stuff, you can find the Campo dei Mori, which is where the Greeks first settled, and they built 3 statues of these Greek brothers who came to the city and got quite rich as merchants, and the local people hated them and made these very grotesque, caricature-esque faces for the 3 brothers. And so the Greeks, when they were depicted in Venice, were depicted always with these quite grotesque caricatures where they had very big ears, very long nose, a big wide chin. And if you look at the doorknobs over here, you can see that the Greeks actually had quite a sense of humour about this, and they decided to adopt it and use it as their own doorknobs. And so if you look at the bells over here, you can see that they've got the face of what the Venetians said that they received. Just because the Greeks actually thought it was quite funny. And compared to some other groups in the city, the Greeks had it quite alright. Certainly they were nowhere near as persecuted as the Jews, for example. And Greeks, obviously, there was a fire that started near what is now the Jewish ghetto, and it spread all the way through Rialto and destroyed the Doge's palace as well. So hugely devastating fire, and in the wake of that, the city changed loads of laws of the city to prevent future fires. One of the things was that the fire itself was caused by one of the glass factories that was over in Cannaregio, and all of the glass factories were forced to move to Murano. So that's why we have Murano glass, but more importantly, they made it illegal for you to have a traditional wood-fired oven in the city, and that law is still in place today. So you cannot find good pizza in Venice. We have terrible pizza compared to the rest of Italy because we're not allowed to use the proper oven. So if you want a good pizza in Venice, honestly, there is one takeaway that is near the train station, which will do it by the slice for €2.50, and it's fantastic. And there is one in Cannaregio, which I've never been in sober, but drunk is the best place in the city. Beyond that, I do not recommend pizza at all.
And pasta?
Pasta is much better. We are much better with pasta. Loads and loads of good places for pasta. I will send you a list of my favourite restaurants around the city and places to try, because I have eaten my way around the city very well over the years. Venetian food is honestly so underrated. Like, people talk about like Bologna and Napoli as kind of like the food places to go. For me, Venice is all up there. Like, especially for seafood, Venice is so good. So I do really like it. Also for street food, Venetian street food is fantastic. Anyway, I did stop here for a reason, because this is the Libreria Acqua Alta. So this is very famous bookshop. Unfortunately, it's also very crowded. So I only really recommend coming here at like 9 o'clock in the morning, because otherwise it just gets really full really fast. So the bookshop is famous, A, because there's a colony of cats that live here, which is quite cute, and B, because this is a shop that was designed to withstand floods and is also decorated with books that did not survive previous floods. So when you walk around, a lot of the walls and things like that are held up and supported by damaged old books. And at the back there is a staircase made out of old books which you can climb up to go and get a view out over the canal, which is really cute. So it's a good place to go and get a photo. Also in the centre of the bookshop there is a huge gondola going, right the way through the centre of the shop, so that if there is a flood, gondolas float. So anything that's on the gondola will be saved. And a lot of other things have been kept in boats and bathtubs and other things like that that would float if there was a fire, if there was a flood. So yeah, really funnily as well, in 2019 there was a really devastating flood in Venice, and the Libreria Acqua Alta, basically to show off, decided to stay open throughout the flood. Because of the fact that most of their books were in things which floated or really high up, they suffered very little damage, and it just became quite like a fun thing to do for the Venetians to get your wellies on and come to the bookshop to see how they were doing. If we go around the side, you can get a better view of the interior, because it's really, really lovely. One of the fun things that you notice as well is in the Venetian canals, there's no traffic lights or any kind of one-way systems or anything else like that. This is one of the few one-way systems in the entire city. It's very disorganized, and yet there's very few crashes. The only place that you get crashes is around the Rialto, and that is always the fault of Ali Laguna, the company that does the ferry to go to the airport, because they are rubbish. But every other case, you're absolutely fine.
We did see last time we took the gondola, and there was under one of the bridges that said,
there's one by the Rialto, there was a crash there in February. So in February, somebody crashed the Ali Laguna ferry into a gondola and then into the side of the Rialto bridge, and then smashed up this pier on the other side as well. And so we had 9 tourists in the water. Gondola was broken to smithereens, absolute nightmare. And the controversy about it is, so Ali Laguna has a monopoly on all traffic in the lagoon. So they're the only one that can take you to and from the airport. They're the only one that can take you to and from Murano Burano. And the reason they have this monopoly is because they sponsor the basketball team. And so they keep giving the basketball team money, and in return the city doesn't have contract talks or negotiations with any other companies to make sure that they're the only company that can run in the lagoon. And like I say, they are rubbish. I was doing a tour just yesterday, and the people were saying that they were on Ali Laguna ferry that crashed 3 times going from the airport to their hotel. Absolutely terrible, completely inept. But yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. But if we head on. Okay, yeah. I really love Castello in general. This part of town is much more residential than San Marco. You can see, it's so quiet for one, and you can see everyone's boats outside their houses. And all this decadence, and so all of the old churches are made with brick, with the exception of San Marco. Later on, when Venice gets really, really rich, they completely abandon all these principles entirely and decide to make everything as beautiful as possible. But the older buildings, they're generally made of brick. You can also see you've got that flower design that you have outside the Doge's Palace over here. And you've got, if you remember, I don't think I mentioned it while we were at the Doge's Palace, but this is a really common design of windows in Venice, to have these little tiny circles. So these were on all of the buildings in Temple San Marco. And this is a very old design. Sponsors the local football team as well, so there's a joke among Venetians that whenever we go out for a drink, we're yeah, we need to sign a new striker. And so we'll just go out and give 10 euros to the football team, basically.
How do you spell it?
Cynar. Chinar.
Cynar.
Yeah. So I really recommend trying both of those. They're both delicious. Select and Chinar. I really love them. Yeah. Anyway, if we head across here, this is the church I wanted to show you.
Oh, wait, zoom out for a second. Where's your arrow? Right there, at the bottom. So rotate your phone.
they would just load that onto the canal barges and bring that all the way across. If they were bringing it from Carrara, either they would go all the way.
Ia uite, ne-am nimerit.
Sì, il pezzaccio è perché
Exact pe placul meu.
sì, la fino e tutto quello.
N-are rost. Nimeri bine. Trebuie să luăm niște pizza de aici tradițională. Cu niște bere din asta de lor. Așa. O bericică. Foarte bună. Încă fierbe. Da. Să bem un șpriț aici, unde se vede aici cu fetele. Așteptăm să ne vină șprițul.